Good evening. I'm Ben Greenebaum. I'm a retired professor of physics. Dr. Bopat is ill today, and she asked me to fill in as MC. For the people in her class, I guess normally after this presentation you go to a regular class meeting. There will be no meeting tonight. She will expect you to have finished the Elie Wiesel book night next week. It's a great honor for me to introduce to you our guest tonight, Mr. Howard Melton. Mr. Melton presently lives in Glendale on the north side of Milwaukee. He is still active in his businesses of auto parts and auto repair, auto salvage. And beyond that, I think I'll let him tell you about himself and his history and his experiences. Later on, we'll have a chance for a few questions if you'd like.
Thank you.
And you may want to use the mic.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we will.
I am a Holocaust survivor. On June 22nd, 1941, I was in a summer camp, and we woke up about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. We heard noises, and they told us that Germany had launched Operation Barbarossa, the attack on the Soviet Union. We were about maybe 30 kilometers from our hometown. They took us back to our hometown. It was a Sunday. And on Monday morning, my family and most of the Jews of the city, I lived in a city called Kaunas, which was the capital of Lithuania at that time. Now it's Vilnius. There were about 160,000 people, and about 40,000 were Jews. So the Jewish population was about 25%. Most of the Jews started running away from the Germans, because we knew that the Germans did not treat the Jews very well. We didn't know they were going to kill us. So we started running away. My father, my mother, an older sister and I, and a younger sister and I, and thousands of other people, Lithuanians, Russian soldiers, running towards the east, running away from the Germans. We left Monday morning. We got about maybe 35 kilometers from our hometown, a little town called Yanova. We stopped for the night. On the way there were German planes strafing us and killing us. We stayed overnight. Thank you. And on one side of the city, the Russians, on the other side, the Germans, and they were fighting all night long. We went to a little stream. There was a little stream running through this little town. We went there, but later all night long. The next day, the Germans marched in. We went back to our hometown. Lucky for us, nobody bothered us. We came to our hometown, and right away the Germans passed anti-Jewish laws. Before the Germans even came in, the Lithuanians, who were very anti-Semitic, they still are, with an unmitigated hatred for the Jews, killed between 8,000 and 10,000 Jews. One day they were your neighbor, the next day they came in, robbed you, raped you, and killed reason, because you were a Jew. Finally, when the Germans came in, they passed right away anti-Jewish laws. You could not use public transportation. You could not go to any parks. You could not walk on the sidewalk. When you saw a German soldier, you had to take your hat off. And any Lithuanian or any German, if you didn't like the way you looked, or the way you talked, or the way you walked, could just kill you without any repercussions whatsoever. Jewish life was worthless. Finally, they made the Jews put a six-cornered Star of David, yellow Star of David, front and back. Now they didn't have any problem recognizing who's a Jew. They picked Jewish men and women off the streets and took them to the 7th Fort or 9th Fort. And Collins had 10 forts built around the city during the First World War. What they were used to in normal times is to house prisoners. So they took the Jewish men and women out there to kill them. Finally, they decided to put all the Jews in a ghetto. They picked the poorest suburb of the city, called William-Paul Lithuanian and Slobodkin Jewish, and about 30,000 people had to move in. And there lived maybe between 8,000 and 10,000 people. There were no sidewalks, no running water, no sanitary sewers. What you had to do, you had to exchange an apartment with a Gentile. The Gentiles that lived there had to move out, and the Jews had to move in. Made the Jews build a fence around it, and anybody caught outside the fence after August 15, 1941 would be shot outside. And they meant to do. But they had a problem. The main roadway running right through this little suburb, we didn't have many roadways to begin with, so they couldn't shut it down. So what they did, they built a small ghetto on one side and a larger ghetto on the other side, with a wooden bridge connecting both ghettos. In this small ghetto, there were about maybe 6,000 people. The orphanage, the hospital, the old age home, were all in a small ghetto. The Germans decided it was not a good situation. On October 7th, they boarded up the hospital with the patients, doctors, nurses, visitors, whoever was in there, set it on fire, burned everybody to death. It took about 6,000 people, took them up to the 7th Fort, and shot them. Men, women, and children. On October 28th, 1941, the Germans decided there were too many unproductive people in the ghetto. Unless you worked for them, unless you helped them during the war, they didn't keep you around. So everybody had to assemble in an open place called the Mokwatu place. You had to be there at 6 o'clock in the morning. Nobody went to work. You had to be there whether you're crippled or couldn't walk. You had to be there. You had to leave your windows open, your doors open, your cupboards open. And anybody caught in their home after 6 o'clock in the morning would be shot outside. And they did it too. There were two men, one SS man named Rocker, and one SA man named Jordan. And you came before them, individually or as a family. They looked you over. If they thought they could get some work out of you, you could still be productive for them. they sent you to the left. They thought you were too old, crippled, too young, they sent you to the right. It took about 10,000 people, put them in a smoke cat overnight. The next day they took them up to the 7th fort and shot them, killed them. Men, women, and children. After that, there was lots of women to get home. That's when I lost my grandparents, and I lost most of my family. In February 1942, the Germans took 500 men and shipped them up to Latvia, which is a mixed country above Lithuania and the Baltic Sea. And the reason they shipped them out there is because the Latvians were also very anti-Semitic, killed most of the Jews up there, and they needed slave laborers to work it to expand their airport up there. So after that, they took my father up there. In October 1942, they asked for volunteers to be shipped up to Riga. Usually you don't volunteer for anything. But my mother knew that my father was shipped up there, so she volunteered. So my mother, my older sister and I, the younger sister and about 500 other people were shipped up there. And I think that action that my mother took saved my life. Didn't save my mother's life or my sister's life, but it saved my life. Because that camp up there was not by the Luftwaffe, but the German Air Force. And it was not as rough a camp as camps run by the SS. We actually lived in an old brewery there. There were about 500 550 people. We worked at the airport. They had a farm up there. The Luftwaffe had a farm up there. They asked for volunteers to work at the farm. I volunteered to work at the farm. Working at the farm was not as hard as working at the airport. So it wasn't so bad. You could always get an extra carrot, or extra slice of bread, or extra potato. So it wasn't a bad camp at all. The men slept in one part of the camp, the women slept in another part of the camp. We were guarded by the Luftwaffe, by the German Air Force, and they were very, very nice to us, actually. The food was not too bad. Till summer of 1943, the SS took over our camp, and then things changed drastically. They took everybody that was not at work and shipped them to Auschwitz. That's when I lost my younger sister. Had I not been working, I would have been shipped there too. Maybe somebody else would be here. Finally, in spring of 1944, the Russian front got pretty close to us. So they shipped us back to Lithuania, to a war camp in Lithuania. Then they shipped us to a ghetto in Lithuania. And finally, in June of 1944, they shipped us to concentration camp Stutthof, which is close to Danzig and the Baltic Sea. And that's when they separated the men from the women. You got in the camp, they took everything away from you, cut your hair, made you spread eagle, searched you thoroughly, made sure you didn't hide anything, gave you a striped uniform, a coat, a pair of pants, and a pair of wooden shoes, gave you a shower, spread you with DDT, and we were lucky the water came out instead of gas. They gave every prisoner a number and a colored triangle. The Jews had yellow triangles, political prisoners had red triangles, homosexuals had pink triangles, criminals had green triangles, and they put us in a barracks, maybe made the house maybe 80, 85, and we slept in us 3-tiered wooden bunks. We were about maybe 200, 220 boys between the ages of maybe 12 to 16. If you didn't find a room in a bunk, you slept on the floor. We were guarded by 2 couples. Every barracks had overseers that were called couples. And those 2 couples had green triangles, so we knew they were there for criminal activity. Every morning when they chased you out, they stood on both sides of the door with sticks and hit you. And if you happened to sneak by, they'd call you back and give you twice as much. Then they took everything away from us. They gave us a little metal cup or a little metal bowl with a piece of wire or a piece of rope to hold your pants up. And this little cup was your lifeline. If you didn't have it, you just didn't eat it. In the morning they chased us out. They gave us some coffee, a Satzkaffee, substitute coffee made out of, I think, boiled straw, slice of bread, and a piece of margarine. And we sat in the sand, doing nothing. Till about 11:30, 12 o'clock, they gave you some soup made out of weeds and a few floating potatoes in it, another slice of bread. You sat in the sand again, doing nothing. Till about 5:30, they repeated the process. I have a friend here, we're from the same hometown. He's actually about 3 years older than I am. He went to school with my older sister in the hometown. And we started speaking together, and we've been speaking since 1995. But they had a heart attack a couple of years ago, and he told me he can't speak anymore because it's too much of a strain on his memory. Is not too much for him. He said, he can't talk anymore, so I'm talking myself. We were all the camps together, we were liberated together, and actually because of him I came here to the States. We wanted to get out there in the worst way, because we knew one of these days they're going to come for us, because in the gas chamber. Finally, in the beginning of August, they were short to a work transport for concentration camp Dachau. And they came in the camp and they said, whoever is 15 years old or older should come forward. I wasn't. I told them I was 15 years old. So they shipped us to concentration camp Dachau, which is in Bavaria, in Germany. And from there they shipped us to Dachau, had 10 sub-camps, war camps. They were called Außenlager. They shipped us to camp number 10. We were about 500, 550 men. We built a factory from the ground up. We manufactured concrete beams, 40, 50 feet long, reinforced with steel. The Germans were going to use to build underground airports in the Tyrol Mountains to extend the wall. The work was pretty hard. We worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, handling cement mixers and lorries. We carried those 50-kilogram bags of cement, pretty heavy. At the beginning, the food was not too bad. They gave us soup twice a day and a loaf of bread divided by 3 people. But towards the end of the war, the Germans themselves were short on food. So they gave us a loaf of bread divided by 10 people and soup only once a day. And the person that divided the bread got the last slice, so made sure he divided it evenly. We did not have any sanitary facilities except some wash basins and some toilets. The only time they gave us a shower is when they shipped us from camp to camp. They gave you a shower, sprayed you with DDT, and give you a change of clothes. Now you know, unless you take a shower every day or so, change your clothes, you accumulate lice. And lice leave on only one thing: human blood. Finally, in April 1945, the American front got pretty close to us, so we marched back to Dachau. It took us about 2 days to get there. And when we got to Dachau, the situation was very, very bad. We saw the Schwelle cars with dead people laying inside and out, and it was horrible. The next morning they told us to report to the gate. Evidently we must have been the best looking specimen that came in there, because we had to march out again. We were probably about 2,500 prisoners, and they had Russian prisoners there too. I didn't know they had them. And about 5,000 Russian prisoners. They gave us a small loaf of bread and a small can of meat, which we hadn't seen maybe in a couple of years. Of course, if you were a smart prisoner, the first thing you did was ate it, because then nobody can steal it from you. And I think most prisoners that survived that long were pretty smart. They marched us out, and we were marching in the daytime, guarded by assessment with German Shepherd dogs. But then American planes came over, started strafing us, because we were long columns. Started marching at night. No food, no water. If you lay down, you fell down, they stuck the dogs on you, we didn't get up, put a bullet in your head. It was the end of you. Finally, on, I think it was May 1st, they rushed us into a little ravine, surrounded on 3 sides with little hills, and with some machine guns on those hills, and we knew it was going to be the end of us, because the Germans had told us 5 minutes before 12, we're going to get rid of you. We're not going to leave you alive. So my friend and I will lay down, we said goodbye to each other, but we woke up the next morning. Evidently, the commander of the transport maybe wanted to save his own skin. He didn't kill us. They marched us out again. We marched for another maybe 30 or so kilometers. They put us in the woods. We woke up May 2nd, 1945. We were covered with about 2 inches of snow, because it was close to the towering mountains. And all the guards had disappeared, all the dogs had disappeared in the night. Nobody there. 2 old German soldiers, because they started drafting their people in the 60s, those in the war, marched us into this little village. It was about maybe a kilometer or so away from the woods, called Watkirchen. And about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we saw some tanks coming down the road with some white stars. We didn't know the Americans used white stars, we knew the Russians used red stars. But the first tank that came into this little village was very dirty. But when it left, it was very, very clean. People were crying and kissing it. And it's like getting new life back, being born again. The Americans were very good to us. Maybe a little bit too good. They gave us sea rations, hamburgers, chocolates. And being so emaciated, not having eaten for so long, naturally, most people overate. And when you overeat, your body is not used to such food. A lot of people died from overeating. My friend and I were in and out of hospitals for about 2 years, till we recuperated. were German hospitals, American hospitals. In December 1947, my friend decided to emigrate to the United States. He was an orphan and didn't have any family, so he immigrated to the United States. I stayed in Germany. I kept getting letters from him, how wonderful the people are here, how great this country is. So I decided to come and do. I came here in August 1949. In June of 1950, the Korean War broke out. My friend got drafted into the United States Army. If you wanted to become a citizen, you had to serve. I didn't want to get drafted, so I joined the United States Air Force. I served for 4 years in California. I married a woman in 1951. She's from Milwaukee. She graduated high school and she came out of California 2 weeks later and we got married. We've been married 60 years this last June. We have 4 children. We have 9 grandchildren. And we have 2 great-grandchildren. I can tell you one thing though. When I awoke on May 2nd, 1945, if I could have written my own future, I don't think I could have done a better job. Because life has just been wonderful. Now the basic food in the camps was potatoes and bread. In the last camp where we were, the Germans themselves were short on food. And they gave us some bread we called smoking bread. Tell people it's smoking bread. So, what are you talking about? The bread was so moldy that when you ate it, green smoke came out of your nose. But it tasted great. I don't think anybody in the United States knows actually what hunger is. Maybe the people in Africa and Darfur know what hunger is. But not in the United States. Hunger is something that one person cannot describe it to another person. It's impossible. I mean, real hunger is not the normal human feeling. Just like people ask me, what did it feel like when you were in the camps? Because it's a feeling that no normal person can have. I don't know, but somebody maybe gets sick or doesn't eat for a couple of days. When they get well again, they say, my God, I'm so hungry I can eat a horse. Well, I did. When they were taking us from this woods to this little village, there were some dead horses lying on the side of the road, shot by airplanes maybe. The prisoners jumped on it, picked it clean. By the time I got there, nothing left. I took a rock, broke the horse's head, and ate some of the marrow. And I'm sure some of the prisoners that ate some of the meat probably didn't survive. Like I said, the staple food in the camps were potatoes and bread. In the last camp in the world, the Germans did not have any refrigeration. Even though it's southern Bavaria, it still gets below freezing in the wintertime. So what they did, they dug ditches in the ground, lined it with straw, put the potatoes in it, covered it with straw and dirt, and every day they used to take out so many potatoes to feed themselves and the prisoners. And one of the ditches got full of water, and the potatoes rotted. Everybody knows how rotten potatoes smell, right? Horrible. And in the barracks where we were, we had a little iron stove, wood-burning stove to keep us warm. I got out at night, got some of those rotten potatoes. These potatoes were so rotten, you didn't have to peel them. The meat was that far away from the potato, and all you had to do is break it open, and the meat of the potato right in your hand. My friend and I were making potato pancakes on this little wood-burning stove. At the same time, there were prisoners still lost themselves. Now, you know, unless you take a shower every day or change your clothes, you accumulate lice. And lice live only in human blood. If you had a cut or a sore, the lice would congregate there and actually suck the blood out of you. So you took your coat off or your pants off. The lice usually accumulated in the seams of your clothing. You run it on the hot little stove. The lice with the perish will jump off. Either way, you got rid of them. It's either you got rid of the lice or the lice got rid of you. I saw something that I can't get out of my mind. Seeing that person was nothing unusual. You were just happy you were not laying there yourself. But what I saw was, I saw a dead man actually move. It's impossible. The man is dead, he can't move. But he was covered with lice. He was so covered with lice that the lice were moving and were actually moving the body. It was actually eaten up alive by the lice. It's something that I probably stick in my mind for the rest of my life. It was a horrible sight. I would like to open up with the questions, but there's only one thing. You have to speak up loud, or I have to have somebody repeat it, because my hearing is not as good as it was years ago. So if I can answer a question, I'll be more than happy to do it. If I don't know, I'll say so. Any questions?
How old were you when you were originally captured, and how old were you when you escaped?
How old were you when you were originally taken out of Germans, and how old were you when you left the camps?
I was 10 years old when I went into the ghetto. I was 14 years old when I was liberated.
Did you
When I was liberated, I weighed about somewhere around 50, 55 pounds.
Did you lie about your age? Did you have to?
Yes, I did. I did lie about my age, and I never changed it, actually. On my Social Security, I'm 2 years older, so I maybe got a little benefit from that, but I stayed the same age.
What was life like for the
Could you speak up, please?
What was life like for the Jews in Germany after the war and after liberation?
What was life like for the Jews in Germany after the war and after liberation?
Well, after the war, they put us in DP camps. The DP camp was displaced person camp. And they put the Jews in with some people that killed us. Some people that escaped from the Russians because they were afraid what the Russians were going to be, because they were collaborators with the Germans. So finally, President Truman found out about it, and they put the Jews in separate camps. The Americans are very good to us. The camps for the Jews was very good. They treated us very good. Of course, most people tried to find their families. Most people tried to go back to their hometown if they could. But by the time my friend and I decided to go back to our hometown, there were people coming back from Russia, because Lithuania was occupied by the Russians at that time, telling us not to go back there because the Russians were returning prisoners as traitors because we worked for the Germans during the war. So we didn't go back.
Are you the only survivor from your family?
Are you what?
Are you the only survivor from your family?
No, for my whole family, maybe 30, 35 people. Aunts, cousins, grandparents, relatives. My father and I were the only survivors that I know of.
Yes, sir.
Hi. I had read that during the early stage of Barbarossa, that while the Einsatzgruppen were going through and committing all their mass killings, that in Kaunas, Lithuania was one particular place where the Germans were actually trying to save labor by inciting pogroms among the Lithuanians and basically giving them a license to kill. Were people more terrified at that time of the Germans and their relatively cold-blooded approach to the Holocaust, or were people more terrified of their own neighbors who seemed to be much more emotional about it?
He's read that in the 1941 era, when the Germans were starting to move through, that they incited the Lithuanians to also start a pogrom. And were the Jews in Lithuania more afraid of the Germans and their rather scientific, cold-blooded approach, or of the more emotional neighbors?
I think the Jews were very surprised by the hatred of the Lithuanians had for the Jews. Because we expect bad things from the Germans. We didn't expect bad things from the Lithuanians. Because we lived amongst them. We were Lithuanian citizens. They didn't treat us as good as the Americans treat us citizens. Because we were a little bit lower in the ranking in Lithuania. But we were very surprised by the Lithuanians, the way their hatred for the Jews. And before the Germans even came into Lithuania, you would be 8,000 and 10,000 Jews. So the Germans, before the war started, the Germans instituted Einsatzgruppen. Their main job was to follow the German army and kill Jews and Russian political instructors. They were called commissars. And they did a great job. I mean, they killed the Jewish life wasn't worth anything. There were some Lithuanians that helped the Jews. There were some, but not enough, very few. Any other questions?
Someone back there, any questions?
Some people ask me,
Go ahead, sir.
Why do you think there was so much hatred for the Jews?
Why do you think there was so much hatred for those Jews?
why was there so much hatred? It's a combination of 2,000 years of history. Some people ask me if I hate the Germans. I don't hate the Germans. I don't hate the Lithuanians. I don't hate the Latvians. I don't hate the Ukrainians or the Slovaks or the Romanians. I only hate the perpetrators that did it. You cannot hate a son or a daughter for what their parents did. They're not at fault. I go to Aldi's. I go to Trader Joe's. I buy German products. I have nothing against them. I just hate the perpetrators that did it. Any other questions?
You said that the only survivors from your family were your father and yourself. Did you get separated from your father through the Holocaust? And if so, did you reconnect with him afterwards? Or were you able to find him after?
Your father was the only survivors in the family. Did the two of you get separated during the war and
Yes.
get reunited?
Evidently, my father must have been in better shape than I was. Because after he was liberated in Dachau, evidently, he thought, like everybody else thought, that if you survived, you'd go back to your hometown. If anybody would have survived, they'd go back there. By the time, like I said, my friend and I decided to go back. But people telling us not to go back. I found out that my father survived the war through I had an uncle in Israel. I knew his name, but I didn't know where he lived. I gave it to the Jewish agency, and they found him. And I got a letter from him stating that he had gotten a letter from my father, who was in Lithuania, in Kaunas. That's the way I found out that my father had survived the war and went back to Kaunas. At that time, it was occupied by the Russians. I couldn't write to him directly because I was in the American zone and he was in Russia. So I sent the letters to my uncle in Israel, and he forwarded to him and vice versa. In 1971 or 1970, when they opened up Russia for tourists because they needed the dollars, and my friend had one of his brothers survived the war, one sister survived the war, so he went back to visit him. So in 1971, my wife and I, we went back to visit my father. In 1973, when he opened up immigration from Russia to Israel, my father went to Israel, and I came and visited him a couple of times. Every 2 years I used to go there and visit him. And he just passed away in 1995, I think at the ripe old age of 93. Any other questions?
Anyone? Yes, sir.
So you went in at a very young age. Was there any stories from some of the older people that were in that maybe like stuck in your head or you used possibly for advice like during your time in from the people that had been there longer?
You were fairly young when you went to the camps. Are there stories about other people who were a little older or people who gave you advice
That stuck in your head?
that you remember, that was stuck in your head?
In the camps, unless you were a father or a real close relative, you stuck by yourself. You take care of yourself. Because the main object in the camp was to survive. I know some people that didn't want to live a life like that. They just gave up. I had a friend here, we were from the same hometown, we were all the camps together, we liberated together. He was an economics professor at MIT. He told me a story about his uncle. When the Germans came in, they asked for 500 prominent Jews in the city. They said, what I wanted to do is find all the craftsmen in the community that should help him during the war. Actually, it was a lie. What they wanted to do is get the leaders of the community so they can get rid of them. They couldn't have an uprising. They took the 500 men out to the ends of the city, made them dig ditches, going to shoot him. His wife found out about him. She went to some prominent Lithuanians and practically got him out the grave. She brought him home. He hung himself. Left a note saying, I do not want to live in a world where one human being can be so cruel to another. He just gave up. Some people ask me, how did you survive? Well, I wanted to survive. I didn't want to give up. I wanted to see the end of Hitler. If I could have died 2 seconds later, I would have been very, very happy. And some people just gave up. I saw people jump on the electrified wire. They couldn't take it anymore. I wanted to survive. Maybe that's what kept me alive. I don't know. Any other questions?
In the back.
You said you still have some remaining relatives alive. I was wondering if you were able to recover any photographs of your family.
You have some relatives still alive. You were able to get any photographs of your family.
Yes, the only photographs I got is from my uncle from Israel. I got some photographs from him. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had anything. But I got some photographs from him before he passed away. That's the only photographs I have.
Someone? Yeah.
While you were in the concentration camps, did you ever see any rebellions going on while you were there, where the Jews were fighting back against the Nazis?
Did you ever see any rebellions in the concentration camp where the Jews or other prisoners were fighting back against the Nazis?
No, I never saw it, but I heard about it. And some people ask me, why didn't you escape? Why didn't you? There were some people that escaped, but you had to have somebody on the other side to help you. Because the first German or the first Lithuanian that would recognize you as a Jew would be the end of you. You had to have a place where to go. There were some woods about 100 kilometers from our ghetto, and I found out after the war there was about, I think it was close to 400 young people, maybe the teenagers or older, escaped from the ghetto and joined the partisans to fight the Germans. But unless you had somebody to help you, to guide you, it was just like committing suicide. I can tell you a story about my friend's little sister. His sister was the same age as my younger sister was. And when they were running away, the little girl couldn't walk anymore, so the mother put her on a horse cart. And planes come down and started strafing us, and the horses took off, and she lost her. The little girl wound up in a ghetto about 80 kilometers from her hometown. The little girl, 6 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes. There was a woman, it was in Latvia, with a woman, she didn't have any kids, she used to work by Jews, and she told her husband to go in the ghetto and say that's his niece, she got lost in the war. So they let her take her out, and the woman saved her during the war, and the woman had adopted her, and they grew up and got married, and they came to the States in 1985, and the woman came here too. She adopted her as her mother. So if the little girl wouldn't have got lost, she would have wound up the same place my younger sister wound up, in Auschwitz, would have been gassed. So by getting lost, saved her life. Any other questions?
What is one thing that you would want all of us tonight to keep in mind for the rest of our lives?
What is one thing that you would like everyone here to keep in mind for the rest of their lives?
That's a good question.
A good one.
Some people ask me if I believe in God. I believe in God. I don't know how many people listen to NPR, National Public Radio, but about a year ago they had Elie Wiesel on. Everybody knows who Elie Wiesel is, right? The famous Nobel laureate. He said he was angry with God. He was only in a camp for 9 months. I was in there for close to 4 years. I couldn't understand why he was angry with God. Human beings did it. God gives you a choice. You be good or bad. The choice is up to you. It's not up to God. So the way you treat the other human being, it's up to you. I like to treat the other human being the way I'd like to be treated. Maybe that's why my life has been so happy. I don't know. But I never met a human being I didn't like. I don't know. If you treat another human being with kindness, he'll repay the kindness to you. Any other questions?
Yes.
Did you ever come across any German guards or soldiers who showed any indication at all of any remorse for what they were doing and seeing unfold in these camps?
Did you ever come across a German guard or soldier who showed remorse about what they were doing in the camps?
Well, about 2-3 years ago, I got a call from a reporter from the Milwaukee Journal, because my name was in the newspaper a couple of times. They were going to report, I think, a Lithuanian. He applied for citizenship in the States under false pretenses. Actually, they found out he was a guard in a camp, and they were going to report him. And she asked me if they should report him. I said, sure. Now they'll report him. He'll probably get a pension in Lithuania. He won't get punished. And she asked me if I ever knew of a German soldier or any German that was kind to me. I said, yes. In the last camp where we were, there was an older gentleman, because they started drafting him in the 60s towards the end of the war. And he was very kind to us. He told us, hang on, the war's not going to last much longer. He told us all the news. He told us when Paris fell. He told us when the Americans crossed the German border. I said, if that gentleman was alive today, I would be honored to have him in my house. In 1988, my friend and I and our wives, we went back to Germany to see the camps, because my friend was, after he got drafted into the United States Army, because he spoke German, they sent him back to Germany to run a German youth camp. So he wanted to go back there, so we went back there, and one camp was completely annihilated, and Dachau was, all the barracks were torn down. They built the barrack up to show you what it looked like. And the famous sign that said, Arbeit macht frei, work makes you free, was in the corner. We had to look for it. And we met, actually, we went back to Germany because my friend, he was on vacation in Hawaii in 1985. And he met the German couple. And they were talking, and the German couple said, if you ever come to Germany, come and visit us. So in 1988, when we went to Germany, we were going to visit him. He was a doctor in a prison. We stayed by them for about 3-4 days. They treated us wonderful. And actually, we still get letters from them. And we told them, if you ever come to the States, come and visit us. So in 1982, they came here. They stayed by us for about 3-4 days. Treated them great. I mean, I got nothing against them. I mean, some of them are, I'll tell you something, that the German people are kinder to the Jews now than the Lithuanians are. The Lithuanians are still very, very anti-Semitic, and so are the Latvians.
You mentioned earlier the 2,000 years of Jewish persecution. Having had all these years yourself to, subject as well. What do you think the essential difference is between the Holocaust and other Jewish tragedies of the past, like the Khmelnytsky pogroms of 1649, or the pogroms of the Black Plague that chased all the Jews to Poland in the first place?
Thinking about the 2,000 years of anti-Semitism, how would you compare, based on your experience and what you've read, the Holocaust to the pogroms of Middle Ages or earlier? To paraphrase.
It all came to a head in Germany. Germany was the most cultured country in Europe, actually in the whole world. And it happened in a country like that. And the world didn't believe Hitler. He's not going to be that bad. But we didn't learn anything. 50 million people got killed in the Second World War. And we still haven't learned anything. There's another Hitler in Iran. And he said before audiences, he says, there's a cancer in the Middle East, and that's the state of Israel. And we're going to wipe it off the map. And the world didn't say anything. The world didn't do anything. Will we have to go through another Holocaust? And if he gets the atomic bomb, it won't be just Israel. It will be everybody. It will be the United States. It will be Europe. Because he believes that, he said, Iran has got 40 million people. Israel has got 7 million people. He says, if we drop 2 bombs on Israel, they'll be all dead. If they drop 2 bombs on us, maybe 10, 15 million people will get killed. But we'll still survive. The world didn't learn anything. And people ask me, why are you speaking? Why are you talking? It's not easy for me to talk about it. It brings back horrible memories. But I want to counteract that Hitler. I want to counteract this hatred. I want people to know what hatred brings. The human race has suffered from hatred since it started walking on 2 feet. So it's time for the human race to get involved with love instead of hatred. Any other questions?
On a lighter note, with the large ethnic German population in this area, what brought you to Milwaukee?
What brought you to Milwaukee?
It's a good question. My friend came here in 47. He came to New York. He didn't have any relatives. He didn't speak English. He said, well, what language do you speak? He said, I speak Yiddish, I speak German. Oh, you speak German. Go to Milwaukee. There's a lot of German people there. You went to Milwaukee. I followed him.
Okay, anybody else? Yes, sir.
You were young, 10 years old when you were taken prisoner to the camps, and you worked there for 4 years. So you were 14. But what about all the different jobs the Germans made you do in those 4 years at the different camps?
As a 10-year-old to a 14-year-old when you were in the camp, what were the jobs they had you to do?
I did all the jobs that all the other people did. Worked on cement mixers, dug ditches, worked on roadways, worked on lorries. I mean, the work was, if it didn't work, you weren't alive. You know, after the war, nobody wanted to listen to you. Nobody wanted to hear about it. You know, I came to New York and I got a room. I got just a room, no food, just to, you know, just to sleep. And I was talking to the woman, it was New York City. And she asked me where I was from, where I do. I said, okay. She said, yes. I said, we hadn't been on the war too. She said, we couldn't get bananas. So I shut up. I didn't speak anymore. Actually, my family didn't know about it. My wife didn't know about it until maybe 1995, 1996, when Steven Spielberg came and interviewed me. I didn't want my family to be burdened with extra weight. I mean, maybe it would have put something on them that they couldn't function, they couldn't be as normal as people are. So I didn't speak about it. And now when they wanted us to speak, we're getting to be like dinosaurs, we're disappearing, you know. I'm one of the youngest ones, and because most of them are gone. And so I don't know, I can tell you one thing though. Your children will not see a Holocaust survivor, that I guarantee you, because we'll be gone. We're disappearing. So it's something that maybe you could pass it on to your neighbors, your friends. And the reason I'm actually speaking is because there are some people going around saying that the Holocaust never happened. It's a lie. Maybe 100,000, 200,000 people got killed. Lithuania had a population of about 3.5 million people and about 290,000 Jews. I found out after the war that 94% of the Jews in Lithuania were killed. 94%, that's... I'm one of 6 survivors of... Why am I so lucky? I don't know. But I want to leave you with the thought that I don't care what you are, if you're white, black, yellow with pink polka dots, our hopes, our wishes, our desires are all the same. You haven't got a choice about to be born. You only have a choice how to live. So if you treat the other human being the way you want to be treated, this will be a wonderful world. And maybe one of you can become president or CEO of the United Nations or very influential organization in the world. Please, I beg you, don't let it happen to anybody else. Because it's the most horrible thing that could happen. See what's happening now. People don't realize what people are getting killed for no reason at all. Because they're not criminals, they had no choice being born. Just that they were born in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.